Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. We are going to talk about pdfToolbox Desktop today. This is an introductory webinar, so we're not going to talk about details. Instead, I'm going to try and show you what this solution does, what you can do with it, how it could potentially be used in your workflow, and so on. So, let's get started here. My goal is to take between probably half an hour to 45 minutes to talk about some properties of pdfToolbox Desktop, what it can do, show you some stuff that will be the biggest part of this presentation, and then afterwards see what questions you might still have. So, first of all, what can you do with pdfToolbox Desktop? Well, I listed some things there that could be cool, and then I hope you can read quickly because there is, of course, a whole bunch of additional stuff that you can do, and then there is some more stuff that you can do. And so you get the point I want to get across. There is a lot of stuff that you can do with pdfToolbox, and it's very easy with this tool to kind of lose sight of all the possibilities because there is so much. And what I want to do in the next half hour or so is tell you where the most important functionality is and how you can explore the product and find all of the good bits in it. So let's start with a little bit of introduction. I only have 5 slides in total, I believe, so this is not going to take very long. What is pdfToolbox Desktop? Well, first of all, it is a product that is created by a company called Callas Software. Callas is a German company. They are out of Berlin, and what they make is a plugin for Acrobat and a standalone application. So if you would purchase pdfToolbox Desktop and you would install it, the installer would install both a plugin and a standalone tool. During the demo, I will use the standalone tool because I find that the easiest to work with, but you can choose whatever is the more convenient for you. It is easy to use on the one hand, and you'll see that a number of ways pdfToolbox tries to offer very easy to use functionality. The switchboard is a good example, something that looks a little bit like a smartphone and has a bunch of already made actions in it that you can simply click to run them. There is also a visualizer to inspect PDF documents that might have problems with them and see visually what is wrong with them. So that's all very easy to use. At the same time, it is and can be a very powerful tool, and powerful because it contains profiles, pre-flight profiles. These pre-flight profiles can be customized to exactly what you need in your particular workflow. If that doesn't go far enough, you have variables, both simple variables and script variables, so you can use JavaScript inside of this tool. You have process plans that go a lot further than profiles because they also have processing logic, conditional processing in it. It goes very, very far if you use all of the more advanced features in the product. And that's somewhat the power, I believe, of pdfToolbox. That is that on the one hand, it is very easy. On the other hand, if you want to do things in your workflow that are a little bit complex, then you can go as far as you want with this product. And pdfToolbox Desktop, the name kind of implies that it's a manual tool, point and click. You need someone to sit there and use the mouse to fix PDF files, examine them, and so on. But the same technology, of course, is also available in automated versions. And you see them listed there. If you would go to the website of Callas Software, you'll see something called pdfToolbox Server, which can do the same things you can do in desktop, but then using hot folders, so in an automated fashion. And you have tools that are specifically created for integration into a web portal or an MIS system or an automation application, and so on and so on. And these are called pdfToolbox CLI or SDK. Like I said, the same functionality that I will show here in pdfToolbox Desktop can be used in all of these automated versions as well. So the engine is the same, but the way that engine is used is in these different versions, of course, different. Okay, so that much for the presentation part, but I think you will agree with me that this is the least interesting part, and it becomes much more interesting when I switch to pdfToolbox to show you what is going on here. What I launched here is pdfToolbox Desktop, and like I said, the desktop version is the manual version, so I have my window here, and now I can drag a PDF document in there, and then depending on the type of PDF that I have, pdfToolbox might immediately already show me something about this PDF. And in this example, when I open this, it shows me at the bottom a little badge that says that this claims to be a pdfX3 file, and it also shows me the name of the color profile, the ICC profile that is embedded in this document. Now, this file claims to be pdfX3, that doesn't mean it actually is. We have not done any type of pre-flight at the moment, but this is pdfToolbox, so I can simply click that little badge, and then pdfToolbox will run a correct pre-flight for me. So because the file says it's pdfX3, if I click that badge, it runs a pdfX3 pre-flight profile, and in that profile it checks all of the requirements for pdfX3 and then tells me that this document is indeed compliant to that particular ISO standard. So as soon as I open a file, I will get some information. I get a nice preview that is exactly the same or looks the same as the way this document would be printed, and from there I can start to work with this document. And now what can I do? Well, there are three main areas of features or technology inside of pdfToolbox that I want to show during this short demo. The first is to be found under Tools and then Switchboard, so the first menu item you have there, and that is this smartphone-ish user interface that I already mentioned before that lets me run predefined functionality on my PDF document. The second item that I'm going to show you is the profile window, and we've already seen that. The profile window is the window where you see your pre-flight profiles and you also see the results of pre-flight. So when I clicked that pdfX3 badge before, what opened to show me that the file was compliant was actually the profile window. So that's also an important part of pdfToolbox. And then under the View menu, all of these menu items that start with Visualize and the ones below, but also under the Tools menu, the Explore items, those are tools that are meant to visually explore the PDF document and see whether it is correct. And that's some tools on the one hand, on the other hand, something that is called the Visualizer as a feature, and that can be used to pinpoint exactly where problems occur in PDF documents. Very often after you have pre-flighted them and the pre-flight engine tells you that something is wrong, I might then use the visualizer to figure out what exactly is wrong. So Switchboard, profiles, and then the visualizer and related tools to examine a file in more detail. That is what we are going to talk about, and I'm going to start talking about the switchboard first. Why do I take the switchboard first? Well, because that's probably also where you should start if you don't know anything about pdfToolbox and you want to get acquainted with the product. You want to understand what its possibilities are. Why? Because I have this very simple user interface. I can go into Arrange, for example, and there I see some functionality that can be done, but I can also go into document and I see some other stuff that can be done. So the switchboard is a great way of exploring the basic functionality in pdfToolbox Desktop. And in each case, I can select the group that I want, in this case the arrange group, and then I could say, well, I want to look at step and repeat, for example, and let me take a little file that goes together with that, so a small sticker, for example, and then inside of the step and repeat panel, I have options. The options depend always on the function that you've selected here. So for step and repeat, I can choose how many rows and columns I have, how much white space in between, whether I want cut marks or not. And then when I'm ready with that, when the switchboard is configured the way I want it, then I can click execute, and that runs that function on my PDF document immediately. And I now have 5 columns, 3 rows. I have some in-between white that was added. I asked for 10 millimeters, I think. Well, I actually don't remember. It was 5, I thought so. And then it also added cut marks. Okay. But it does that function immediately, and that means that I can now very easily have other values here, return to my original file, and maybe I want 5 by 4 instead, and run it again until I get exactly what I was looking for. And this is the same for all of the items that I have in the switchboard. Each time you have some options that you select, and then you hit execute, and those options will be used. For example, if I go to document, I could say I want to export an image, and then I can choose which type of image. That could be JPEG, TIFF, PNG, or I could simply rasterize my PDF and into an image, and then I set the options, I press execute, and that image is going to be generated. Okay. Or I could go to pages and take a document that is I think I have something here that is A4, if I'm not mistaken. That's right, 21 by 29.7. So this is an A4 document. And in the switchboard, I could go to pages and then scale to format and say, well, actually, this should not be an A4, but it should be an A5 document. Run that, and it is going to rescale the document to A5 for me. And visually that doesn't make any difference, but you can see that the document format has now been changed to the size for A5. So the switchboard contains functionality that is very easy to use, where each time I have a little explanation about what is going on. So if I go back to scale to format, there is this description at the top that explains how or what this particular function is going to do. Each time I have those options that are specific to what I want to do. So each of these switchboard views is going to have different options, and when I run them, I can hit execute, and that will run that functionality on the document that I have open. What types of things do you have here? Well, let me pick out a few that I want to go into a little bit more detail about. Arrange I've already talked about. This is everything that has to do with the Imposition Engine inside of pdfToolbox. We already saw step and repeat, but I also have the ability to do more complex impositions, or I could create a booklet, or if a document comes as, and I think I just closed it, if I have a document that is saved as single pages, and for whatever reason I need spreads, then I could ask pdfToolbox to generate this for me. So everything that has to do with the Imposition Engine inside of pdfToolbox. What else? Well, there is some prepress specific stuff. I'll give you some examples. I could increase the width of hairlines in the product. I can flatten transparency. I could fix problems with overprint or knockout in the document, things like that. I can look at color and see functionality that is specific to color transformations. And again, a very easy example, if I take a little brochure, I could say, well, actually, I want this to be black and white. And then it's going to process the document for me and going to give me a black and white version. Or I could say, no, I have something that contains RGB and I want to convert that RGB into CMYK. Or I have something that contains a bunch of spot color and I want to do something with those spot colors. Well, the switchboard shows me all of the spot colors, and if I want to change the definition of the spot color or the color of the spot color itself, or I want to simply convert it to CMYK, then all of these things are possible straight from the switchboard. I think you get the idea. You have groups of functionality where then each time you can go into that group and see specific functionality. That specific functionality could have properties to set, or it could have no options to set whatsoever if it's simple enough. And then when I click execute, it will run through the document that is open and it will process that complete document. Some of this functionality is very generic and can be used in all kinds of different market segments, but some of the functionality is very specific to certain market segments. And a good example of that would be a banner. This is 130 centimeters by 220, so this is 2 meters high. It's a typical roll-up banner, for example. Well, there is a group here that is called large format printing. And in that large format printing group, I can do things like add bleed to this. So I could add bleed at the top and the bottom, or I can add white space where I need it if it needs additional material to fit into the rolling mechanism. Or if this is a hanging banner rather than a roll-up banner, I could say, give me a number of eyelets or grommet marks. And again, when I hit execute, pdfToolbox is going to run that on the document. In this case, it actually asks me for a new document first, and then it's going to add these marks with the properties that I selected. So in this case, I asked for 10 grommets, both horizontally and vertically, and I asked them to be 15 millimeters inside of the trim box of this file. So that's exactly what pdfToolbox does. Yeah. So some of it is very generic and good for all market segments. In some cases, you'll find functionality that is very specifically useful in certain market segments like LFP or labels or packaging. Okay, so that's the switchboard, and we explored this to a certain level. But as you can see, in many cases, I have a limited set of options. For example, let's go back to this flatten transparency function here. In flatten transparency, I have options as to how I want to flatten my document. And I basically can choose low resolution, medium resolution, and high resolution. Now, what pdfToolbox does is it uses the Adobe transparency flattening engine, and that engine has many more parameters that you can set than what you see here. They are not available in the switchboard. Why? Because the switchboard is supposed to be easy to use. Yeah. What I can do instead is I can go to the full pdfToolbox powerhouse, which is this profile window. And in the profile window, I have a list of checks, so a list of things I want to check in a document, and I have a list of fixes. And in here, I could now create or use a transparency flattening fix-up, and then you would see that you have a lot more options than what you have in the switchboard. So switchboard is easy to use, but typically only gives you a limited subset of the possibilities of the product. On the other hand, you have profiles, and profiles are fully customizable, give you complete access to what you can do in pdfToolbox, but they are a little bit harder to create. Luckily, you have a lot of examples in pdfToolbox, and if you would download and install a trial version of pdfToolbox, which is fully functional by the way, then you can click on this pull down menu here, and that will give you a list of libraries that you have in the product. And even if you simply install the trial version, you will have, I believe, 5 or 6 libraries that are already in there, and in there you will find examples of things you can check, examples of things that you can fix, so you can simply play with those, and you will find examples of profiles. And a profile is what I have here, for example. A profile is a combination of checks and fixes. So basically, in a profile, I can tell pdfToolbox to fix common problems in a PDF document, and then verify whether those fixes were successful or not. And a good example would be pdfX1a. So I have a file here that claims that it is not yet compatible with pdfX1a, and I could run this pdfX1a profile, and I can run it in 2 ways. I can say analyze or analyze and fix. Analyze simply runs the checks. So if I run that, it will tell me that the PDF document is not compliant because of some things that are missing. For example, every PDF document needs to have an output intent, that is a specification of which color space is used for the CMYK objects in this file. That output intent is missing, which means that the file is not compliant. So I can get this, or I can say analyze and fix, and if I say that, pdfToolbox is going to try to convert the file into a valid PDFX document. And what you can see here is that indeed it ran a whole bunch of fixes, and at the end it tells me, after verification, no problems were found. All of the problems that did exist in the document have been resolved. And that is also shown here, where I can now see a pdfX1a badge. So this file is now compliant with pdfX1a, and I have a definition of the output intent I have in that file. Now, what if I wanted to create a little report? So instead of simply having this window here that shows me what happened, I want to see this under the form of a report. pdfToolbox can give me a PDF report. It can also give me an XML report, for example, which is great for automation purposes. So if I'm using pdfToolbox Server or pdfToolbox CLI, this XML report is used quite a lot by people to then further automate what happens with this document. But in this case, I'm going to choose a PDF report, and let me just generate that. And you'll see that it generates a PDF document that contains an overview of all of the checks and fixes in this document. So here it did only fixes. There were no errors or warnings that remained, and I get a nice green check mark to show that the document is now compliant, a little preview of the document, and then some other information generated about this document as well. This report is based on an HTML template, meaning that if I create a different HTML template, then it could contain my own logos instead of the callas logo or the pdfToolbox logo. Or I could omit some of the text because I think it's too difficult for my clients and I want them to focus on what is important in this report and only show those things. So the reporting that pdfToolbox can do, it can be fully customized in terms of how it looks. It also supports multiple languages, so I could generate a report in Spanish or in French or in German if I want to, and that gives me the result of what happened after I run one of these profiles. Now I now have pdfx1a file. One of the questions I've received quite a bit is it's nice to have this pdfx1a file, but I require pdfx4. Now how do I do that? Well, you simply run a different profile. I can run different profiles on this PDF document, and what it did now was it took the pdfx1a document that I already had, it converted that into a pdfx4 file, and then it gives me a pdfx4 document. Okay. So with a profile you can do a standard pre-flight, and pre-flight means correct the things that you want to correct and then verify that everything is now in order. And in this library here I have a number of pre-flight profiles that I put, but I can go to one of the standard libraries. A very important one is prepress color and transparency. That's one of the default libraries that you also have in the trial version. And in there you will not only find a whole bunch of PDFX profiles, but you will also find a prepress section that implements profiles from the Ghent workgroup. So these are market segment specific, and for example you could say if I'm working with magazine ads or if I'm doing sheet-fed offset work, well, I here have profiles that have specific checks and fixes for those market segments. Okay, let me go back to my other library for a second, and I'm going to show you, and I don't want to go too far in that because I have too many examples, but I do want to show you some stuff. So let me run this and we'll see what happens. So I opened this packaging example again that I had before. This was an example with all of these spot colors in it. And what I've run now is not a profile, but a process plan. And in the presentation at the beginning, I told you that process plans are another way of running actions on a PDF document, doing things with a PDF document, that I can do conditional processing and I can build a sequence of things that need to happen on my PDF. And here you see a relatively simple example. This has a first step that adds 10 centimeters to the right of this file. So I added 10 blank centimeters of space to the file, and then there was a second fix-up that adds additional information to it. And what I did for this example is I analyzed the document itself and I added a list with all spot colors and how much of that spot color is used. Yeah. So just to show that pdfToolbox can go much further than simply adding a than simply doing pre-flight on a document, these process plans show that you can also use this to generate additional versions of a PDF file or to run something that will be important in finishing of a PDF in a workflow. And here is one other example that I wanted to show. This is again a process plan that gets run, and in this, this is a fix-up, a single fix-up. It could be combined with other fix-ups in a process plan. And what I do here is I add a barcode, and that barcode has the name of the document. So I built a little fix-up that uses inside of it a little variable, and that as a result adds a barcode outside of the trim box of the document. What we see with customers is that pdfToolbox initially is very frequently used for simple pre-flight tasks, but because it can do much more than that, it is, as time goes by, also used for adding finishing information to documents, things like barcodes, text, page numbers. It can generate die lines automatically. It can add layers for a varnish or an undercolor white. It can do all these additional things that in a workflow can automate tasks that previously were done by someone manually. So this is the second part. We talked about the switchboard first, and then we talked about the pre-flight or the profile window, where you have pre-flight profiles, but you also have these more powerful process plans that you can run. And then we need to look at the last part of pdfToolbox, which is the visualizer. And then to do that, I'm going to go to Visualize Ink Coverage, one of the menu items under View, and that will start the visualizer part of pdfToolbox. And I've started it with the ink coverage view. And in the ink coverage view, I can set a ink limit, and pdfToolbox will then highlight everything that goes over that ink limit. I have this kind of temperature scale. So basically, if something is colored in yellow, it is between 0 and 10% higher than the ink limit that I've set. The more I go into the red, the more severe the ink overrun is. And for example, here you see that this logo contains lots and lots of ink, so this might be a problem in print. This might or might not be a problem in print. And then everything outside of the trim box uses spot color all, so that ends up at 100% on each separation. So it's no coincidence that that is shown in this magenta color, which says 400% of ink or more. Why would I use this? Well, in many cases, the first thing you do with documents is run pre-flight, and I can make a pre-flight profile that checks ink coverage and that tells me whether the file is good or not. But what that profile does is scan the document, and as soon as it finds areas that are over my ink limit, it will tell me the document is not good. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that it can actually not be printed? Or does it mean that some small part of the document is over an ink limit, but it might still work? That is why the visualizer has been invented. So that you can open a document and can visually explore whether something will be a problem or not. And I have different views that I can use to examine a document. For example, still remaining in the ink coverage section, I could look at a different view, and now it shows me all the ink from 0 to 400 in the document. So same information displayed in a little bit of a different way. And by the way, as I move my mouse across the document, you can see the color patches there that show me the exact amount of ink in that particular location of the document as well. Now, what if I'm not interested in that, but I'm interested in knowing whether there is enough bleed in this document, for example? Well, then we can take the safety zone area and maybe I switch it to bleed. And now it shows me the trim box of the document as this red line that lays across the document. And then for each element, I can see whether it comes close to the trim box, and if so, whether it extends far enough beyond the trim box to be usable in my workflow. Again, things that can be done during pre-flight, but things where very often you want to verify afterwards what exactly the problem is and maybe see if you can fix the problem. Because, and that's something that we've seen before, well, I could go to switchboard and then say add bleed. And under add bleed, I have different algorithms to generate bleed for this document. And looking at this document, I could, for example, say repeat last pixel. So basically, it would look at what pixels I have at the trim box edge, and then if there is no bleed, extend those across the well, up until the bleed box, basically. So I have pre-flight to warn me of a generic problem. I have the visualizer to tell me whether this particular document upon inspection is really going to be an issue or not. And then you can use profiles, or you can use switchboard actions to clean up this document and make it ready for print. So that's one thing in this visualizer. Now let me open two other documents perhaps, and I'm going to close. Well, actually I wanted that one, so I'm going to open two documents, and these two documents are well, they are versions of the same document, except that one of them was the original, that's this one, and the other one is this one here. And maybe I want to see what the differences are and whether I haven't broken anything. Well, this too you can do with the visualizer, and for that you would use the compare documents item. And with compare documents, pdfToolbox would compare the two documents and then show me what the differences are. And if I look at that in detail, you could see that in this case something went wrong with some of the characters in this file, because all of the differences are either characters that disappeared in one version or that shifted between the two versions. So this document went through a workflow and something broke it, and that's why I have these textual changes between these two documents. So pdfToolbox can help you figure out what the differences are between these documents, or, and that's the last thing I am going to show, I can take my original document here again, go to View, and then go to Object Inspector, and with the Object Inspector I can see all of the elements, all of the objects that I have in the document, and for each of them their parameters. So I have an image here that has a, well, this is the number of pixels in that image, and I have the resolution in there. And if I want to understand how this document was built, I can see it in wireframe, or maybe I want to, well, if I want to know whether this is real text or not, what I can do is hide all the text, for example, and that shows me well, only the shadings, images, and vector elements that are left. So again, this is a way of identifying where the problem in a document might occur and why it might be a problem. Okay, if there are any questions left after this very quick introduction to pdfToolbox, then now would be a good way to enter them into the questions section. What we have seen, just to go back very quickly, we've talked about the switchboard, which is this easy to use functionality, is also a great place to start when you want to explore pdfToolbox and understand what kind of functionality there is. Simply click on each of the groups, look at the functionality that interests you. You can read the description that is there, and you have the parameters to modify what this particular function is going to do. So that's the switchboard. Secondly, if you want to go a little bit further in pdfToolbox, then you can look at the profile window, and in this profile window look at the checks and fixes that you have available. Like I said, I have a lot of libraries here, but even in the trial version you will have something called prepress color and transparency. You will have something called PDF standards, for example. So there are 5 or 6 libraries, default libraries, that you can go in and experiment with. You can run these on documents. You can look at what the results are and what happens. When they contain fixes, you can choose to either not run the fixes or run the fixes, and that lets you explore that functionality as well. You'll also find some examples of process plans in some of these libraries, so you can start playing with all of that functionality that is in there as well. And then last but not least, you have the visualizer tools. We didn't really go into the Explore tools, but that's mainly because in many cases the information is a little bit more technical on this side. But we talked about Visualize and Explore, which are tools that are or can be used to look at the document that you already know is a problem, for example, and then examine where exactly that problem is and whether you can fix that. Okay, so questions. I think most questions have been answered, but I have one here that has not been answered. So question is about the possibility to create an opaque white separation. So basically undercolor white, as it is often called. So is there a way, if I'm printing on something that is transparent, for example, could I take this nice penguin? Where is my nice penguin? Here. So can I take this nice penguin and can I generate either a varnish that only covers the penguin itself, or an undercolor white layer that well, that gets printed first and that I can use on a transparent item? The answer is yes, you can do that and much more. And it is done either in a profile with a fix-up. The fix-up is called the shapes fix-up, or if you go to the switchboard, you can go to large format and then add ink layer. And in add ink layer, I could say I want to add white, color value, whatever you want in here. If it's an undercolor white, then it would be at the bottom. And then I can say everywhere. So if you want a varnish that covers the whole trim box, for example, I would say everywhere. But I can also generate, and that's what we would do for an undercolor white, I could say for all objects. And then when I run that, and let me save that in a different file. When I run that, it will add an additional layer under all elements. Now, what is annoying is that we don't see it because it's under all elements. But I could use the visualizer and look at the individual separations I have in this file. And I now have an additional separation that is called white. And in this case, it's well, but I have other elements on top, so this is not a very good example. But it adds this white undercolor for me. Let me see whether I have an example that is a little bit more visible, because it wasn't colored very correctly here. Where is my penguin again? Yes, here. And let me, so now it is again to CMYK. And let me use a fix-up, and let's see if we have a nice example fix-up for a varnish. This one, for example, and we're going to use a little test mode. There. So what I've done now is a little bit different. I've added a varnish and I've made the varnish bigger. Now, the fact that you see these spikes here is because of one of the properties in my fix-up, and I could fix that. Where do I fix that? It's a good question. Okay, I'm struggling now. Let me see. This is what I want. I added 1 millimeter here. Yeah, okay, it's going to take me too long to do it right now. But what you can see here is already what you want. This is a layer that is added on top in this particular example. So I added something that is cyan in color, that is I think a 30 or a 40% tint, and that gets added everywhere where I have objects in this document. Yeah. So either in the switchboard or using the shapes fix-up, you can actually do this. What I would suggest is that you try this on your documents. If you don't succeed in making exactly or getting exactly the result that you want, feel free to send us an example and we'll help you figure out how exactly to do that. You can send the example file and the question, and that is for any question that you might have about the product. You can send that to support at callassoftware.com, and that ends up in our support box, and then we'll get back to you with an answer to that. But basically, you can add layers either at the back of existing objects or on top of existing objects, and those layers can have any color you want. They can have a spot color name that is exactly the spot color name that you want. So for a varnish, you could call the spot color varnish. For a white, it would probably be called white, but sometimes it's 5 and sometimes it's something else. Depends on conventions that you afterwards have in the workflow. So all of that is possible. You can also put them on a separate layer, but that's definitely something that is supported in this whole workflow. And because you can do this as a fix-up, you can also have it as part of a profile or a process plan. So you could make a process plan where, first of all, you run a pre-flight profile to see whether the document is correct or not. And if the document is correct, it's without errors, then you automatically add a die cut line, or you automatically add a varnish, or you add an undercolor white. And those could all be separate actions in such a process plan that get added once you know that the document is correct. So these things can be automated to a high degree as well. It is not the case that you need to click 15 times. You can build a process plan here that will do a whole list. This is an example that will do a whole list of these fixes, one after the other, and as such prepare the document for final production. Okay, I think all other questions have been answered. Like I said in the beginning, don't hesitate to get in contact with us. Let me, to end this, let me go to the Callas software website very quickly. And on the Callas website, you can download a trial version. That's the first thing that is important. So I can go to pdfToolbox, and then under the pdfToolbox Desktop tab, you can click on download, and that downloads a 15-day trial that is not limited in functionality in any way. It will simply stop working after 15 days. You can also go to support, and under support there is report a problem, but you can also use that to simply ask questions if that happens, or send an email to support@callassoftware.com. And what is also interesting, and I want to point out, is you have a section here called webinars. And if you go there, you'll see a lot of webinar recordings, and in a lot of cases they talk about very specific things that you can do with pdfToolbox. In other cases, they talk about general technology topics. A very good example of that is this one, fonts in pdfToolbox, which talks about fonts in general, the technology, what can go wrong with them, how can you fix it in pdfToolbox, how can you detect the problems in pdfToolbox. So there is a long list of pre-flight, I see pre-flight and I say it, of course, a long list of webinars that talk about questions, topics. And because they are all recordings, all you have to do is, well, go watch them, and then you can fast forward to the bits that interest you. The alternative is that you go to YouTube. Callas Software has a YouTube channel that you can subscribe to. All of these videos are actually on YouTube if you go there, so you'll find them there as well. But that way you can also subscribe, and you'll be notified as new videos are uploaded to that YouTube channel. Thank you very much for joining with so many. I hope this was interesting. It is only a very first introduction to pdfToolbox. I realize that it's very fast and there is a lot of things that you can do with the product. If you have specific questions or you're unsure about something, please do not hesitate. Send an email to support@callassoftware.com, and we will help you as quickly as possible with your specific question. If you have a question on how to do something, if you can Please always include not just the profile that you are using, but also the documents, an input and output document, for example, or a before and after, what you want to accomplish. That makes it much easier for us to help you figure out how to do that in pdfToolbox. Thank you once again for joining. I'm sure I will see many of you again in upcoming webinars, and have a very great rest of the day.